In the Jim Crow South, black families paid taxes for public education. Then many had to raise money, donate land, cut timber, and give their own labor before their children could enter a decent schoolhouse. In effect, they paid twice. The buildings they created are usually called Rosenwald schools, after philanthropist Julius Rosenwald. His support mattered. So did the work of educator Booker T. Washington. But the familiar name can obscure the larger story. Black communities were not simply given schools. They organized to build them inside a public system that denied them equal treatment. After Reconstruction, Southern governments separated black and white public education and funded it unequally. Many rural black children studied in churches, homes, barns, or other makeshift spaces. Their schools often had worse buildings, fewer teachers, fewer services, and poorer books. That unequal system reinforced economic dependence and white political control. Black parents and educators nevertheless made schooling a priority. One of those educators was Washington, principal of Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. In 1911, he met Rosenwald in Chicago. Rosenwald joined Tuskegee's board, and in 1912 he provided the first grant for a school-building experiment. The first 6 assisted schools were built or opened in rural Alabama in 1913 and 1914. More grants followed. The Julius Rosenwald Fund was incorporated in 1917. Tuskegee administered the early program, and in 1920 control shifted to the fund's office in Nashville. Rosenwald money was seed money, not the full price of a school. Public authorities had to participate, and local school boards generally had to own and maintain the buildings as public property. Black residents contributed cash, land, lumber, supplies, and labor. White private donors also contributed. The final accounting makes the structure clear. The facilities cost about $28.4 million. Public funds supplied nearly 64%. African American communities supplied about $4.73 million, or nearly 17%. The Rosenwald Fund supplied about $4.36 million. White private contributions supplied the remainder. Black communities did not finance most of the construction. Public money did. But their recorded contributions slightly exceeded the contribution of the philanthropy whose name became attached to the schools. And that community contribution came from citizens already supporting public education through their taxes. Those contributions were not identical from place to place, and black Southerners did not have equal resources to give. A landowner might donate a site. Other residents might provide lumber, haul materials, perform construction work, or raise small amounts of cash. The matching requirement turned each project into a local organizing campaign. It also placed a heavy burden on people living within an unequal economy. If a community could not assemble its share, outside seed money could not by itself produce a school. What looks in an accounting ledger like one contribution category was, on the ground, a collection of different sacrifices. The matching formula was a form of leverage. It pushed white-controlled public systems to invest more in black education. But it did not make those systems equal. Local boards still held power, and racial inequalities in salaries and services persisted, even where fund programs helped lengthen school terms, improve teacher pay, or support libraries and transportation. The buildings themselves were carefully planned. Standard designs ranged from one-teacher schools to larger campuses. They emphasized ventilation, sanitation, site selection, reflective interior paint, and the direction a building faced. Banks of tall windows captured daylight in communities where electricity was often unavailable. Some plans used movable partitions, so classrooms could become a larger gathering space. Teacherages housed educators, while separate shops supported vocational instruction. These were more than classrooms. Rosenwald schools hosted plays, pageants, fundraisers, exhibits, celebrations, church services, and meetings. A purpose-built school could become one of a community's central institutions, created through many contributions that surviving financial totals cannot fully describe. The scale was enormous. The standardized record lists 5,357 facilities across 883 counties in 15 states. That number included 4,977 schoolhouses, 217 teachers' homes, and 163 shop buildings. The recorded pupil figure was 663,615. It is best understood as the program's documented service or capacity figure, not a count of every unique child who ever attended. The program produced more than buildings. A peer-reviewed economic study found significant gains in black school attendance, literacy, years of schooling, cognitive test scores, and later migration to the north. The largest gains appeared in the most disadvantaged counties. Those are broad statistical effects, not a claim that every student had the same experience. Some alumni later became nationally known. John Lewis attended Dunn's Chapel Elementary in Alabama, a Rosenwald school also attended by his parents and grandparents. Maya Angelou identified Lafayette County Training School as her school. Their prominence shows part of the program's reach, but most of its history lives in ordinary lessons, local teachers and families whose names never became famous. Construction grants normally ended in 1932, although the fund continued other work until 1948. The schools remained in use for years afterward. Then, on May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown v. Board of Education that state-mandated school segregation was unconstitutional. Integration did not follow immediately. Resistance and delay continued. Over time, desegregation, consolidation, and local decisions closed, altered, or demolished many historically black schools. Many black teachers and principals also lost positions. Communities could gain a legal victory against segregation while losing schools and educators they had sustained for decades. Only a fraction of Rosenwald buildings remain. Fisk University preserves school index cards, photographs, maps, and administrative records that help identify them. Some surviving schools have been restored as museums, educational spaces, and community centers. In 2024, the National Park Service completed a national study recognizing the program's significance and recommending a network to connect its surviving history. Calling them Rosenwald schools is useful, but incomplete. Julius Rosenwald's money helped expand an experiment across the South. Booker T. Washington helped give it form. Public funding paid most of the recorded cost, and black communities supplied money, property, materials, labor, and relentless organization to obtain public schools from governments that had already taken their taxes. The buildings reveal both sides of that history. They are evidence of official inequality, because communities had to make extraordinary sacrifices for basic public education. They are also evidence of collective power. Under Jim Crow, black citizens turned limited resources into lasting institutions and made a demand their governments could not honestly answer. If education was public, why was equality something they had to purchase for themselves? Like this video and subscribe to The Real Stickman History for more overlooked history.